Welcome to the Easier Way to Sell presentation of Close the Deal Without Selling. Here is your host and developer of the Easier Way to Sell, Krieger.
This is Krieger. Welcome back. We have a very informative podcast for you today. It's all based on how do you achieve your outcomes that you have now learned how to identify, whether it's your outcomes in your sales call, whether it's the outcomes in a project, how you set those outcomes up and how you make them realistic and achievable is a good portion of this episode. But we're going to start off with a how not to sell piece. I'm not quite sure it's going to need any more introduction than that, so here you go. I just got off the phone. I just got off the phone. I was out in the backyard doing some writing and the phone rang. I picked it up, I put it on the speaker and said, "Hello." The voice on the other side replied, "Hello, Mr. Krieger. This is Cindy. I wanted to get back to you not only because you asked me to, but when we talked about 6 months ago, you were such a nice man, I wanted to call you back personally. You said you needed some work done around the house." I stopped her. I said, "Whoa." She kept going. I said, "Whoa." She stopped. I said, "I just want to let you know you're talking to a sales trainer. I like to let my profession slip to someone trying to sell me something in a yucky way." She asked inquisitively, "How did I do?" I said, "You might have received higher marks if you hadn't started off by lying to me." I've never heard anyone say, "I'm sorry," and end the call. No. I said calmly, "You know we've never talked. You haven't a clue whether or not I need home repairs." She asked the only question I ever get asked during calls like this. She asked, what could I have done differently? I told her I would have said, "Hi, and I'll be brief. What's one part of your home that could use some updating or repair?" She replied, "Oh." She asked for my number, which I thought was funny since she had called me. I gave her the website address and said goodbye. This call is why salespeople get a bad name. This type of call reinforces and magnifies the negative image of sales and salespeople. This type of call works in a universe with its own little numbers game. Think of who your clients would be. These type of solicitation calls reel in unsuspecting and or gullible buyers. We're better than that. You're better than that. The A in can does not stand for lying. Tell the truth. Remember, your yes formula sales strategy depends on a marketplace that's ready, willing, and able to buy from you because they want to buy from you. And I'd bet that if unsuspecting or gullible buyers are in your business model, you would have stopped listening already. Remember to tell the truth. Even better, use the system. Just ask questions. If you're a sales manager or a sales consultant and you would like your team or your individual clients to be more effective at reaching their numbers on a regular basis, you may want to introduce them to the Easier Way to Sell. If you think that would help their business and yours, contact us at closetheddealwithoutselling@gmail.com for information about our simple licensing program. By 1978, I was a hot dog communications instructor, but I wasn't that great at business. And I was involved with a partner in a enterprise in San Diego, California, and I got really upset about the way things were going and how it was going to affect us in the future. And he asked me, "Have you ever looked at what we're doing as if it were a project? And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You take everything as if it were this lifelong task you have, and you turn it into a life and death critical situation that must be handled or there be grave consequences." He said, "Why don't you just think about it like a project with a beginning, a middle, and an end?" It wasn't the first time in my life that a light bulb went off, but a light bulb went off and I went, a project. That's a much better way to look at whatever tasks I'm involved with. And all you really need to figure out is what you want the project to accomplish. What is it that you want? Now that comment, that coaching literally changed my life. And as I look back on my conversation with all my clients over the years, each and every one of them was having a similar challenge of not really being adroit, adept, trained in how to identify outcomes. Most people don't know what they want. Most people know what they don't want. They know they don't want a certain person on their sales team. They know they don't want the brochure in a certain color. They know what food they don't want for lunch. They know what movie they don't want to see. But when you ask them, what do you want? Most people go, I'm just not sure, or I don't know. Knowing and clarifying an outcome is a challenge for most people. What you have to be clear on is the task you want to complete and the by when you want to complete it. So for instance, here's a project. I'm going to get my garage cleaned up by Sunday. You have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's not, I need to rearrange my whole house and the garage is a part of it. It's, I'm going to clean my garage by Sunday. Now, that's an outcome stated in the positive. That's a completely different internal communication than saying, I sure wish my garage wasn't so messy. One's active, I'm going to clean my garage by Sunday, or, oh, I sure wish my garage wasn't so messy. Which one is more likely to be acted upon? Now, the effective communicator model asks you to, 1, know your outcome, 2, know whether you're moving away from or towards that desired outcome, and 3, if you're not moving towards your desired outcome by doing what you're doing, you need to do something else. And that is a marvelous model for people who know their outcome. So here is a different model. It's called the structure of results. And the structure of results help you define your outcome. Because the very first question in the structure of results is, what do you want? This is a big challenge for people. Remember, we think in terms of what we don't want. I'm asking you to consider what you want out of a sale, what you want out of a sales call, what you want out of a conversation about a date, what you want in a job interview, what you want to happen when you go in and ask for a raise, what you want when you're trying to get a new client. It all comes down to knowing what you want. So let's pretend for a moment that that's a skill set that you've developed and you know what you want. Here is the structure of results which allows you to achieve that outcome. 1, what do you want? 2, how will you know when you got it? 3, what will happen if you get it? 4, what will happen if you don't get it? And 5, what's stopping you from having it already? Those are some pretty powerful questions. And if you take the time to go through that exercise of the structure of results, you know what you have? You actually have a plan in front of you, a clear and complete pathway to knowing what you need to do in order to achieve what you want. So you take the effective communicator model, you take the structure of results, you put them together, and that helps you be more successful. But the challenge is that most people don't think this way. So remember, you have to know what you want, and then you have to ask yourself, how will you know when you've got it? What will you see? What will you feel? What will you hear? What will the crowd be saying when you've achieved your outcome? So, the first two questions are, what do you want? And how will you know when you've got it? Now, the third question, and this is a fun one, is what will happen when you get it? What will you hear? What will you see? What will you feel? What will you experience? Fourth question, what will happen if you don't get it? Now, you have to be careful with this one because a lot of people in the past have said, no problem, I'm going to get it. The question here in the exercise is, what will happen if you don't get it? What will you hear, see, feel, experience from family, from friends, from your internal dialogue? And the fifth and final question is, what's stopping you from having it already? This simple question asks you to look at your blueprint for achieving your outcomes and helps you recognize in what areas you need to make adjustments. Remember, the third step in the effective communicator model is if what you're doing isn't producing the results you want, you need to do something else. That's the structure of results. What do you want? How will you know when you've got it? What'll happen if you get it? What'll happen if you don't get it? And what's stopping you from having it already? For those of you who are visual or would just like a different take on the structure of results, I produced a video in 2008, which is still available online, and you can find it if you Google Ike Krieger structure of results. And watch it, enjoy it, and really understand that the structure of results combined with the effective communicator model, if you take those exercises to heart, you will create a roadmap for yourself that will help you get from where you are to where you want to be. In other words, you're going to change your present state to your desired state. That just sounds good. All right, so now you know what you want. And now you need to go about the task of making that happen. What steps do you actually take in order to achieve your desired outcome? Well, if you're familiar with the legend of King Arthur, you've probably heard of Merlin. He's been in comic books and the movies. There was a movie called Merlin. And Merlin lived his life in a very interesting way. He lived from being an old man to a young man. He lived his life backwards. And in doing so, he moved from the future to the past. And therefore, when he looked forward in time, he kind of knew what was happening because he had lived it in reverse. And the Merlin map, which I first heard about in the mid-1980s for project management, is taking that same concept of living backwards and creating your future on paper. You do that by starting with the end in mind. How long is your project supposed to take? Well, for me to complete this project, it takes 2 weeks. So you have a 14-day calendar and you have your complete date. Let's say that's the 14th of the month. My question to you is what happened on the 13th that put you in a position to complete your project on the 14th? Who did you talk to? Who did you see? What tasks did you complete? In general, what did you do that got you to the point where your project could be completed the next day? Then you move a step backwards and ask, what happened before the actions that took place on the 13th? What happened on the 12th that got you in position to do what you did on the 13th that got you in position to complete your task on the 14th? Now, if you're looking at a project for a month, let's say your goal for the month is to do $8,000 worth of business. You have to ask yourself, okay, here I am at the end of the month and I've done the $8,000 worth of business. Let's move backwards and see how that happened. On what days did I have the appointments? What led to me completing my project the way that I had envisioned it? Where were the prospect appointments? Where were the client meetings? Where were the team meetings that got you to your goal? The Merlin map is a great tool. Use it whenever you start a new project. So I was talking with my daughter the other day, and she mentioned that her daughter, my granddaughter, had a project she needed to complete. And I said, yeah, it's time to tell her about the Merlin map. And I asked my daughter if she was aware of the Merlin map and had we discussed it. And she looked at me and said, Daddy, you've been telling me about the Merlin map since I was a child. And I said, you know what? You're right. I'm going to tell the people on the podcast. And she said, good idea. So that's the Merlin Project. Work backwards, work from the future to the present, and lay out your plan going from now until later by making a plan that works from later until now. Figure out what you did on the day that you achieved your outcome and the day before you achieved your outcome. What did you do to get to that day? What did you do the day before to get to the next day? Now, I realize you have to use your imagination for this exercise, but when you look at life and you look at the things that we deal with every single day, whether it's books, whether it's ideas, whether it's the Merlin Project, it's all made up. Everything in life is made up. I don't care what it is. It's all made up. So make this up. Be successful. Use the Merlin Project. It's fun. You get to imagine a future in which you achieve your desired outcome. Just think about that for a minute. Close your eyes and think about achieving your desired outcome. Now, go and do a Merlin map that gets you from when you completed that task successfully back to right now when you're listening to this and you're ready to say, yes, I'm going to do it. So, go do it. One of the greatest sagas of the 20th century began on May 25, 1961, when the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, stood before the U.S. Congress and proposed that this country should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. Achieving this goal of putting a man on the moon and bringing him back safely would be a technological and human accomplishment almost beyond belief. I mean, flight had only started 60 years prior, and here we are talking about sending a man to the moon and bringing him back safely. Problem was, no one knew how to do it. No one had ever sent a man to the moon and brought him back safely. So the engineers, tasked with putting a man on the moon and bringing him back safely, sat down in a conference room and said, okay, how do we do this? And it was proposed that they create a Merlin map of the project and start with the end in mind. And what would the end in mind be of a project that sends a man to the moon and brings him back safely? It would be him being brought back safely. So you go back to your evidence frame of how would you know that they came back safely? Well, the parachute would land in the water that brought the capsule back to Earth from space. It would land in the water. The people would come down and open the doors, and the man who walked on the moon would get out, and everyone would see that that person was safe. That's how you would know that the man on the moon came back safely. What happened just before that? Well, this capsule containing the men who went to the moon that are coming back safely had to come back down to Earth before it could open up its parachute and land. So what did that entail? That entailed a re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, which the engineers knew could be dangerous, so they had to create some type of protective device so that the astronauts didn't burn up during re-entry. So they devised a heat shield to protect them from that gigantic friction fireball that's created when an object comes back through Earth's atmosphere. Next, they said, okay, how did we get them back from the moon in order for them to then go back through the Earth's atmosphere, be protected by the device that keeps them from burning up, and then landing in the water with a parachute that came out at the right time so that we could see the men who went to the moon come out safely. They then worked backwards every step of the project all the way back to them sitting in that conference room. And when they looked forward, what did they have? They had a plan. They had a plan to put a man on the moon and bring him back safely. Was it the best plan of all plans? We don't know what they came up with at the very beginning, but obviously the plan that they came up with to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade and bring him back safely, it worked. And it worked because these engineers used a Merlin map to bring the project to reality. They worked from the back to the front, and lo and behold, from the front to the back, it was a success. It seems so poetic that Merlin the Magician helped the United States put a man on the moon and bring him back safely. All right, I've achieved my desired outcome. I've completed this episode. What I'd like you to do this week is go over the effective communicator model, go over the structure of results, and of course, work on a Merlin map, even if it's on a project as little or as small or as crazy as just going to the store and getting what it is that you have on your shopping list. Our next episode is going to be very helpful because it's going to give you access to that upper 30% of the people in your bell curve, the ones who are ready, willing, and able to buy and want to buy from you. How do you identify them? How do you find them? What do you say to them? Listen to the next episode. This is Krieger. See you next time.